Istanbul. As soon as we got there, we went to the address that we'd been given. And just as I expected, the bookshop wasn't there anymore.
Okay, I must ask somebody.
After questioning a couple of the neighbors, I managed to find out the name of the previous owner of the bookshop, who'd since set up a stall for second-hand books in the bazaar. It was too late to go there now. We wound up in the district famous for its large mosques. Would we manage to find this famous bookseller 30 years after the murders had happened? We hadn't seen his name in the telephone directory. The stallholder was our last hope. Istanbul's Bazaar district. The next day. Luck was on our side. The stallholder knew the man we were after and gave us his address.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, sir. Okay, thank you. Bye.
The old bookseller lived on the other side of the Bosphorus River. We phoned him, and he agreed to meet us that very afternoon. After more than an hour's travel, the meeting that seemed so unlikely yesterday took place. The old bookseller had fond memories of Volker, an idealist whose entire work was dedicated to passing on ancient texts. In the early 70s, he'd seen him in possession of an extremely old book describing the solar cult. Some collectors attributed this work to Hermes Trismegistus himself, the founding father of alchemy. No one has laid eyes on the book since Volker disappeared in 1975. When I told him that I'd discovered that Volker had probably been murdered, the old bookseller didn't even bat an eyelid. According to him, the book was reputed to have been cursed long before it disappeared. Well, I was fascinated by what I'd found out. Before going any further with my investigation, I decided to publish an article about Volker as soon as I got back to Paris. But for the time being, Karen still didn't have any idea as to who might have killed her father. Several months went by after my article on Volker had been published. Karen had returned to Amsterdam, but kept in touch. After several weeks of investigating, without coming across the slightest lead, I gave up on ever trying to get to the bottom of Volker's murder. I was working on a report in London when I happened to come across an article in a local paper that rekindled my interest in the Volker case. A student had been murdered. The mention of an esoteric ritual associated with the solar cult was cause enough for me to set out for that very evening. The college warden agreed to give me a few details on the circumstances surrounding the murder. The murderer had apparently gained access via a secret door and strangled his victim during some sort of macabre ceremony. The warden gave me the telephone number of the inspector leading the investigation. We arranged to meet at a pub in Enfield.
Are you Jack Lorski? Yeah. I'm Michael Finson from Scotland Yard. I've got something for you. We found the girl in the basement. It was horrible. It looked like some kind of ritual murder. She'd been strangled with a rope. She had a burn mark on the front. A symbol, like a female symbol. You know, the cross. These are the pictures. Pretty girl.
A sect? A role-playing game that went wrong? The inspector was at a loss to explain what had happened. After seeing the photos, I decided to carry out my own investigation. Questioning Helena Whitford's friends and family didn't get me anywhere. However, it wasn't until a few weeks later that my attention was caught by an article in an Italian paper about a Dominican priest who had been murdered in... There were so many similarities between the two murders that I decided to set off for Italy. Karen met up with me in Turin. That was when I realized just how much I'd missed her. I phoned up the journalist working for the local paper, who agreed to take us to the church in the old part of town, which is where the murder had been committed. The victim had been found in the monastery's cellar with his throat slit. Once again, esoteric symbols had been left on the body, along with the words Sol Invictus written in blood. The journalist told us that the victim had been suspected of belonging to a fundamentalist movement. She called one of her colleagues, who'd had more involvement in the case. He agreed to meet us in Rome 2 days later. Rome. Antonio Foscarini was a journalist. He'd been investigating the case for several months.
Near the church.
According to him, 3 other murders at Naples, Geneva, and Toulouse had been committed under similar circumstances. Identical inscriptions had been found on the bodies, along with esoteric symbols as part of some strange ritual. As far as Antonio was concerned, it was an open and shut case.
This was in Geneva.
All the murders were the work of a madman or a bunch of fanatics inspired by some satanic cult.
France. And this one, you know.
The Oxford case was growing at an alarming rate.